Okay, so thanks to Samantha Badri for holding the day, for starting the day in such fine Dharmic fashion, with that really important and beautiful reading of the Buddha's encounter with Brahma Sahampati. Yes, so it does feed in quite nicely to what I'm going to be talking about. I'll try and draw out some of that. But I should say, to start with, that this talk was quite hard to give birth to. I often find that, but because my mind is stubbornly and infuriatingly non-linear, so actually trying to kind of marshal thoughts together and put them down on paper in some kind of sequence that makes sense is not always that easy for me. And with this one, I kept finding it wanting to elude me. You know, I'd set up a particular theme and I thought, right, I'll sit down and think about this theme and I'll commit some words to paper or whatever, but it kept sliding off. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it needs to be personal. It needs to be mine somehow. Yeah, and the other principle was it needs to be simple. Because I realized I was trying to talk about the entirety of the Dharma. And that's quite a hard thing to do. So according to the maxim, keep it simple, stupid, I think that's what I would try to do. Yeah. So when Akasharaja told me that she had COVID and wasn't going to be able to do this day, and was suggesting that maybe we would need to cancel it, I thought that's a real shame. That's a real opportunity lost. I'll do it. And then, of course, this theme suggested itself to me, and the theme was something along the lines of the Dharma, right here, right now. I thought, okay, that's sorted. I can talk about that. But then, of course, over the ensuing days, I realized, oh, okay, there's quite a lot to this. Actually, this needs a bit of unpicking. So my first question, really, my first thought to myself was, well, when I think of the Dharma, what am I actually thinking about? Or what are you thinking about? Am I thinking about lists? Am I thinking about teachings? Am I thinking about the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, the three Lakshanas, and all of the many other lists that the Dharma that Buddhism glories in? Yeah, is that what I'm thinking of? And I sort of came to the conclusion that a lot of the time, that is what I'm thinking about. So I'm thinking about the Dharma as formulated. And of course, that's really, really important. It's really important that we think about the Dharma, that we apply the three levels of wisdom to. So we take opportunities to hear the Dharma like the Shravakas of old, that we turn it over in our own minds, and that we sort of that we then take it deeper, that we then sort of make it part of us through bhavana, mai, prajna. But I think it can be easy just not to get to the stage of bhavana, mai, prajna, and to sort of see the whole thing as a bit of a kind of extraneous package that we can pick up and put down. So people occasionally say things to me like, oh, I hadn't thought about the Dharma or for ages, or the Dharma feels like a long way away. Yeah. By which they mean the teachings, the formulations of the Dharma, I see, are a long way away, or they haven't been reflecting on them recently. Yeah, and that may well be the case. But of course, the Dharma has two aspects. There's the teaching aspect, which is the formulation in words for limited human beings to understand, of something which the Buddha experienced directly, which is for us ineffable, unknowable, mysterious. And then there is, of course, the reality principle itself, which underpins the teachings of the Dharma, which the teachings of the Dharma are a translation of into understandable language, into terms that we can grasp, at least to some extent. Yeah. But I think we can easily overlook the latter and concentrate on the former. So in my own experience, I tend to find that what sometimes happens is that, particularly if I'm not feeling very inspired and I'm a bit flat and I'm feeling myself in the grip of my own conditions, that far from being a sort of source of inspiration and a kind of, a touchstone for me, the Dharma then becomes a sort of framework which is telling me to do stuff. Yeah. So I'll give you a little example of this. So quite recently, I was a bit worried about my work. And being worried about my work kind of opened the door for other sort of opportunistic views and worries and anxieties to come in and sort of as they do. But when I was thinking about work, I found myself going down a fairly well-worn train of thought, like, oh, maybe I should just get a proper job, which like pays decently, and then I'll be happy. Yeah, but then I was vaguely aware of the Dharma over there as a framework of rules and regulations saying, no, you can't do that because that won't work. That isn't good for you. So that would be an example where I felt that the Dharma, rather than sort of being part of me, had become this sort of extraneous thing over there, like a framework that would somehow control my actions and desires. So just an interesting example in my own experience about how that can happen, how we can move from a real kind of vital lived experience of the Dharma to a sense of it as just being this framework of teachings. But of course, we may forget about the Dharma from time to time, but reality never forgets about us. Yeah, what came to mind was the image of Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner cartoons. He will run off the edge of a cliff and then not realize he's run off the edge of a cliff until he looks down and then he falls. Yeah, but the Dharma isn't like that. Reality isn't like that. Reality doesn't let us forget it. It continues to apply whether we remember it or not. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to attempt to do at least, and I'm aware it all feels a bit like teaching my assembled grandmothers to suck eggs, but there we go. I'm going to look at the Four Noble Truths in this particular light. So I'm going to look at them as an expression of the reality principle, which is with us all the time, and also as a way in which we can put those teachings into practice, which reflect the reality principle, and we can put them into practice at all times. Yeah, they are always available to us. So that's the sort of outline. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about dukkha. Let's talk about suffering. Okay, now I'm aware that suffering or dukkha isn't like a great hook to sort of hang your marketing for Buddhism on, you could say. Other religions have a much kind of more sort of unambiguously positive kind of easy message to put out there. Yeah, so like Christian, I don't know, this is where my lack of experience of comparative religion will come out, so I will restrict my observations to things I know a little bit about. But with Christianity, so, okay, just love God, and through the intercession of Jesus Christ and the saints, you will be saved. That's a bit putting it crudely, but that's the sort of message that you get. So you go, okay, that's fine. If I just love God, everything will be fine. Everything will be sorted. Yeah, so I'm just going to stick at that one, because the only other thing I've ever been other than a Buddhist is a Christian. So there we go. Yeah, but Buddhism doesn't do that. Yeah, the Buddha was quite clear about his teachings. The Buddha was quite clear about the purpose of his mission. It was to teach suffering and the end of suffering. He started with suffering. But I feel we can soft pedal around the issue of dukkha. Yeah, we can kind of equivocate about it. We can sort of say things, yeah, well, there is dukkha in life. Life is associated with dukkha, of course, but not always. Yeah, sometimes life is fine. Or then that's an understandable message, isn't it? That's something that we want to feel for ourselves, that we want to put out there to people. And that is of course true on a certain level. Yeah, of course it's true that life is not relentless suffering and discomfort and unpleasantness for people. But I think we're missing an important point when we think about this whole area, is that the person who was telling us that about dukkha was not like us. The person telling us about dukkha was the Buddha. And the Buddha was coming from a completely different perspective, a completely different dimension of experience from the one that we normally speak from. So his words, his take on the whole thing was very different from ours. And he did present a very comprehensive list of ways in which conditioned existence is suffering. So birth is painful. Sickness, old age, and death are painful. Not having what you want is painful, and being confronted and forced to be with what you do want, with what you don't want, is painful. But there's more to it even than that. And I'm going to illustrate this with a story about my guinea pigs. So we've got two guinea pigs who basically have the run of our basement. Yeah. So they're quite sort of happy in their own little way. They scurry about, they eat and they shit, and and if they could, they'd make little guinea pigs. But they're both male, so that's kind of not an option for them. That's about it, really. And sometimes I would sort of look at them, think of them in the basement, think, poor little guinea pigs, they're spending their entire life in this basement. Surely that's a bit limiting and a bit restrictive for them. But then again, they're guinea pigs. They've got food, they've got shelter, they've got places to hide. They're safe from predators, even though they still run away every time we come near them. They're fine in their own guinea pig little world. Yeah. So this whole issue of kind of dukkha, in a way, for them is very, very different. It's very immediate. As long as they've got enough to eat and they're not being killed and eaten by predators and they're warm and they can hide, they're fine. Yeah. And sometimes I think people are, unenlightened beings are a bit like that. We are kind of scurrying about in our basements, in our world, doing what we do, getting on with our lives. Sort of basically, as long as we've got sort of fundamental conditions in place, then we're fine. Yeah. But that's where the resemblance with guinea pigs ends, of course, because we, unlike guinea pigs, have a special kind of intelligence and a special kind of self-reflexive awareness, which allows us, opens up to the possibility of something higher, of something more meaningful. Yeah. And the Buddha, from the perspective of awakening, was able to see that. He was able to see human beings sort of scurrying about, accumulating possessions, making money, having families, eating, doing all the things that, well, to some extent, the guinea pigs do. But he could also see that some of them were aspiring to something beyond that. And he could see from his enlightened perspective that all of that being unawakened is just one mass of suffering. Yeah. And the point is this. So no matter how good things are going for us, how well our life is, how well we have managed to arrange everything to keep dukkha at bay, there is one final condition which is not in place for us, which is we are not awakened. Yeah. And that is the sort of ultimate sort of definition of suffering. Yeah, you could say. So you could think of it in terms of the three types of suffering that the tradition talks about. So you've got dukkha. Yeah, so suffering of the body, suffering associated with having an organism, with being embodied like this. Yeah, so it breaks down, it gets old, it lets us down. We get toothache, we lose people, stuff like that happens. Yeah. Then there's the dukkha of transformation, viparinama dukkha, which is the dukkha which is associated with the fact that things are constantly changing, that whatever we have now, we're going to lose, whatever good fortune we're enjoying now, we'll lose, will not always remain with us. Yeah, we will not always have the good conditions we have now. We will not always have the happiness we have now. Yeah, so there's a sort of sense in which transformation, the threat or the promise of transformation, means that we can never really fully relax. Yeah, we can never really kind of relax and be happy in what we've got now, because at some point it's going to end. And then there's khandha dukkha, so existential dukkha, which is what I'm talking about here, which is that sense that no matter what we've got, no matter how bright and sunny life is, no matter how skillfully we arrange the elements of our life, we're not awakened. Yeah, there is a vacuum, there is an absence, there is a yearning in our hearts, there is something which is not fulfilled. Yeah, I can only talk from my own experience. Yes, please understand that. But my experience is that the more I have delved into the Dharma, the more acutely I feel that sense of not being awakened, of being me, of kind of being this sort of irredeemable, slightly stupid sort of, self that seems intent on doing harm to itself and others, despite all of its, the knowledge which is available to me. So in that sense, dukkha is an ever-present reality for unawakened people. The quality of it changes, its focus changes, but that is the truth of the thing. Okay, so that's dukkha. So what causes dukkha? Well, it's craving, isn't it? It's samudaya. We come from dukkha to samudaya. So I was thinking about craving, and I was thinking I could try and say something really clever and original about this area. But in the end, it boils down to a quite simple thing, really. It's about wanting things to be different or wanting things to be the same, depending on what we've got. Yeah. So if we are in a situation with something we don't want, something that we find unpleasant and congenial, which is causing us pain, inconvenience, which is not what we want, then we want it to go away. You know, we want things to be different. So you could say that that's the aversive side of craving. It's wanting stuff to go away so that we can be happy, so that our world can be complete, integral, whole, and satisfactory. And I was just thinking about this morning. Just this morning, there were myriad little examples in my own experience of this going on for me. Couldn't flush the toilet properly. We have a toilet with a strange flush. Yeah, I feel quite attuned to our toilet flush because sometimes I just know it's going to work. And sometimes it doesn't, even though all of the same physical processes are in place. Pull the handle and the thing doesn't flush. Pull the handle again, thing still doesn't flush. At which point I might sometimes say to it, oh, sod you then, don't flush, see if I care. And I have actually said that in the past, right? Yeah, so wanting my toilet to flush so that my life can be, everything in my life can be as it should be. I couldn't find my shoes. Yeah, I don't want to be in a situation where I can't find my shoes. I want a life where my shoes are there and I know where they are, so I can just slip them on, right? Okay. Cycling away from my house, big SUV idling in the middle of the road by the church, blocking my way, driver having a chat with somebody on the pavement. Again, noticing, I so much don't want this to be part of my life. I don't want these things to be in my life, and I don't want the people in them to drive inconsiderately. And so on and so on and so on, and so it goes on. Yeah. So numerous instances of wanting life to be different. Yeah. So by the same token, when we have something that we want, a situation that we are finding congenial and enjoying, we want that situation to remain. We don't want to lose it. Yeah. So there's this constant sort of tension between desiring to keep hold of things, yeah, that suit us, that make us feel happy and comfortable and secure, and push away the things that sort of cast a shadow on that sort of bright and sunny life that we'd like to have. So it's as simple as that, really. So dukkha arises, through wanting things to be different and wanting things to be the same. And then there's nirodha. So there is cessation. Hooray! Yeah, it is possible for this to end. Okay, so reality. So the enlightenment, it's not, it's elsewhere. Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because I was listening to Samantha Badri's reading, and she was talking about how the Buddha says that what he discovered was difficult and abstruse. And I was thinking, yeah, but in a way, it's also completely obvious and completely apparent. So Pingyir, in the Pingyir's praises of the way to the beyond from the Sutta, which has to be my favorite Dharma text of all time, talks about the Dharma as being readily apparent, visible, immediately visible all around. Yeah. So what I assume is that the kind of an intellectual understanding of the Dharma is readily apparent to us, is readily graspable, but a deeper engagement with the implications of it is not. But nonetheless, reality is around us all the time. Yeah, and it is always trying to teach us. Yes, it's a bit like the image of the Buddha as a kind of mother bird knocking on the eggshell, which contains us as little chicks that are struggling to hatch. Yeah, reality is always trying to teach us. Just now, I was getting the microphone out of the cupboard, and I reached up to get the bag, and the spreader thing fell off and landed on my foot, and it was slightly painful. And I felt myself wanting to go, oh, I don't want that to be in my life. But then I kind of thought, yes, but hang on, this is a teaching. This is a teaching that things happen. Yeah, due to conditioned co-production. You know, if I pull this thing off the shelf, it's going to fall and land on my foot. And my foot being there, it's going to hurt. Yeah, and there are so many ways in which, you know, impermanence is trying to manifest for us. I looked at myself in the mirror this morning with my top off. It wasn't very edifying. because I'm not grey or anything yet. I can sort of live in this kind of comfortable illusion that actually I'm all right. Aging has bypassed me. But I looked at myself and I thought, you're going south, mate. It's all going down. It's all being dragged down. It's almost as if the earth is trying to drag me back to itself. Yeah, bit by bit, everything is drooping and sagging. And my face is drooping and sagging. And all you have to do is look at photographs of yourself through the ages to see how true this is. Yeah. So, reality is just trying to teach us. It's trying to teach us all the time. Yeah. It's just there. It's happening all the time. So, yeah, it's not an abstruse thing which is like kind of miles away that we cannot possibly aspire to. Reality as it is there all the time. And we can close the gap, which is good. So we can close the gap. There's marga, there's path. Yeah. So there's ethical practice. So sometimes ethics can seem like, again, as I said earlier, it can seem like a kind of a set of rules and stuff that stop us getting what we want and stopping us from having fun. It can appear that way. Yeah. But if we're looking at it in that way, that's a kind of quite a strong indicator that we are not in alignment with reality. Yeah, we are, as it were, 180 degrees the wrong direction, so to speak. Yeah. So ethical behavior, ethical conduct, when practiced by a Buddha or somebody who is very spiritually developed, is a natural expression of being aligned with the way things are. Yeah. It's a natural expression of having seen through the illusion of fixed, separate selfhood. Yeah. So when we are selfing particularly strongly, that's when ethics can just seem to be this thing that's stopping, that's kind of keeping us constrained, keeping us limited. But in fact, the very opposite is true. Ethics, as it presents itself, as it's presented to us in Buddhism, is a path to freedom and a path to satisfaction, because when we practice ethics, we are at least trying to align ourselves with reality, with a reality that says that kindness makes us happy, that generosity makes us happy, that stillness, simplicity, and contentment make us happy, that being kindly speech makes us happy, that having a clear awareness unsullied by intoxicants makes us happy. And there are immediate ways in which there's an immediate sort of feedback process. This isn't just a kind of theory. It's readily apparent in our lives, in our experience. Well, it is in mine. And there's some quite low-hanging fruit with this stuff, I find. And one particular area is speech. Yeah. So some areas of ethics are trickier than others. But I've found in the past, when I've taken a conscious precept not to practice critical speech or slander or backbiting or gossip, and just to speak kindly, then lo and behold, doing that has a feedback effect on the quality of my mental states. Yeah. So ethics, when we practice it in that sort of way, has an immediate positive effect on our mental states, on our quality of experience. Yeah. So we can see in that sense, the Dharma, practicing the Dharma does bring immediate results, immediate benefits for us. Yeah, I've noticed that quite strongly. So even if we might a little bit be faking to make it, it does actually have a positive and uplifting effect on our mental states. And the same thing goes with all of the other ethical precepts, I would say. And of course, we're practicing ethics in conjunction with awareness, with meditation, which is the second great stage in the threefold path. Yeah, so you can look at this in two ways, well, several ways, or many ways probably. But one simple application of the principle is that we just bring awareness to our actions, to our mental states on a moment-by-moment basis. So because I was switched on to this talk, I was quite good at that this morning. The fact that I couldn't find my shoes didn't send me into a kind of like angry reactive response. Yeah. I actually brought some spaciousness to that, some awareness to that. And I just thought, I'll find my shoes. And so I found my shoes, and it wasn't a big drama. Yeah. I'll skirt around that big car. I skirted around the big car. Nobody died. It wasn't a big drama. Yeah. So I brought awareness to this. And this is what we can do, you know, on a moment by moment basis. We can just simply choose to be aware of our patterns, to be aware of when we slipped into reactivity. And coming back to that story about when I was, well, I'm still slightly anxious about work, but I was more anxious about work when there was nothing happening. And as well as the sort of embodied anxiety about work, which is sort of reasonable because, you know, I need to earn money, I noticed a tendency for all of these kind of opportunistic views about me to crowd in through that portal which had been opened. So lack of self-worth, how one measures one's self-worth, you know, against achievement in life and how much money one earns and all that sort of thing. I could see them all crowding in. I could see them all wanting to kind of overwhelm my heart. But because I was on the case I was quite on the case with awareness and feeling quite inspired from the chairs meeting, I could sort of open up and allow the sort of bigger picture in. And these voices didn't get traction on that particular occasion. I was able to sort of remain above them in a certain sort of way, free of their malign influence. So that was a way in my immediate and lived and practical experience, I could see that this actually does reduce suffering. Yeah. So ethics reduces suffering, and bringing awareness to our daily lives allows us to make positive ethical choices that in their turn will also release suffering. But then there's, of course, there's meditation proper. There's sitting on the cushion. There's cultivating those qualities of metta and mindfulness that we all bang on about, that we teach newcomers. And we teach them to newcomers because they work. Yeah. They're not beginners' practices. They're elemental practices. They are the foundation and the underpinning of everything in the Dharma, in our practice of the Dharma. And so there's the whole kind of samatha element of meditation practice, which helps us to become aware of our patterns, to exercise choice, to regain agency in ways that will make us happy. And what I've also kind of enjoyed more as I've, I suppose, just become more experienced in meditation is those times when you can sit on the cushion and simply open up into the blue sky. Yeah. When all of these difficulties and this sort of inner tension of trying to kind of sustain this separate being will resolve itself and into the blue sky. And at times like that, you know, it's almost as if I feel I can sort of reach out and touch infinity. Yeah, which sounds very grand, but actually it's not. It's just a simple application of awareness to experience and just noting that actually it can just all kind of dissolve into energy. Yeah, it can all dissolve into nothing substantial that you can really grasp, that you can really sort of, you know, put your hands on, so to speak. So, as well as being a tool for us to act more skillfully in life, it is in itself a kind of portal to a more expansive, more open, more spacious way of being. So here we're entering, of course, into the third of the stages of the great threefold path, which is that of wisdom, about which I don't feel I can say a great deal, and maybe it's not even appropriate. But I suppose I would just end with the words of our friend Pingia. No, there it is. They call him Buddha, enlightened, awake, dissolving darkness with total vision and knowing the world to its ends. He has gone beyond all the states of being and of becoming. He has no inner poison drives. He is the total elimination of suffering. This man, Brahmin Barbari, is the man I follow. It is like a bird that leaves the bushes of the scrubland and flies to the fruit trees of the forest. I too have left the bleary half-light of opinions. Like a swan, I have reached the great lake. And I love that image of the great lake. You know, it's so you know, compared to my kind of normal or frequent experience of being kind of restricted and small and kind of constrained, that sense of openness, of freedom, of expansiveness is something, certainly something that I would wish for myself, and I wish it for all of you and for everyone else. So may we all make our way to that great lake like swans and meet there in the great lake of freedom and liberation.